In the frostbitten hills of Vestfold, Norway, where the sun barely breaks the pines, sits the ruin of Esther Chapel, swallowed by ash and lichen. In 1927, 31 members of a breakaway Lutheran sect vanished overnight, their Last Supper bread petrified. Wine turned black remains, untouched at the long pine table, plates arranged in the shape of a binding rune. Beneath the floorboards, infant bones swaddled in cassettes deemed theologically volatile. Church records were sealed until 2135. I've recovered a confiscated ledger the clergy said never existed. The house didn't creak. That's what made it worse. It just ... listened. No wind, no breath in the walls. Just the sound of him. Soft steps. The brush of fingers over old varnish. The little wheeze his coat made when he bent to read a label. Too faint to trust. Torment. Shouldn't have been here. He knew that. The parish's archive floor was sealed. Condemned. But when the old pastor left for the mainland, he'd handed him the keys. All of them said something like, "Just don't open the choir loft. Let the past rot." Then he was gone. But the lock on the third drawer had turned to Isley. And inside, not sheet music, not choir rosters, just a wooden box, heavier than it should have been. Black mildew kissed its corners. The label, curling at the edges, read, "Hymns unsuitable for youth. Choir." He sat at the long dining table to open it. The table was still warm. He didn't think anything of it. Not yet. It was July. Maybe the sunlight from the cracked window. Maybe the box had held heat. But still, his fingers hovered over the edge, waiting. He lifted the lid. Inside, a journal, bound in what looked like calfskin, water-stained, pages stuck together, a cross sewn crooked on the front, black thread still damp. He touched it. His thumb came away tinged brown. The first page was glued to bone, a small oval sliver, ivory-colored, delicate. It was wedged beneath the first leaf like a pressed flower. Not carved, not artificial. A knucklebone, maybe. Child-sized dot. He closed the book again. Just for a second. His eyes wandered the table. The table ... tormund, froze. There were plates. 4 of them, white ceramic, stained and chipped. Spoons curled like sleeping snakes, and cups. One still held milk, sour, clotted around the rim. They never cleared the plates, because no one ever left the room. The words dropped into his chest like a stone. He stood, fast, chairs scraping loud. Too loud. Something shifted under the table. He knelt, his breath caught. Shoes, small ones, lined in dust, but ... paired. Set, just so, for pairs, facing out, not tossed, not forgotten. Left, like they were waiting to be filled again. He reached under. Fingers brushed something soft. A hymn book, tiny hand-stitched, a name carved in the leather lever. The rest was worn away. He opened it. No notes. Just one line. Over and over. A child's handwriting, hesitant, dipped in something darker than ink. "I will not sing with my mouth full of sin." Again. "I will not sing with my mouth full of sin." Over and over, until the pages bled through. Tormund dropped the book. He looked at the chairs. All 4 had backed. Their cushions worn in the center. One still held. The ghost of an imprint, legs swinging. Once ... the silence in the room had changed. Not louder, just listening harder. He picked up the journal again. The first page had loosened. He peeled it back. July 2nd. The children wouldn't open their mouths. Not even for milk. "I told Sister Arneth they needed discipline. She agreed. The bell rope was soaked before the first hymn ended." He turned the page. July 6th. Leva screamed during "Come, Holy Ghost." "I asked the Lord to blind me to it. He did. I can still hear her, but not in the ears." Tormund's fingers shook. His throat ached. The journal smelled of damp wool and iron. July 10th. The bishop visited, said they're rehearsing well. He wouldn't meet the children's eyes. Gave them bread. Told them it was sacred. They didn't chew. The ink trailed off here. The next page was blank except for a print, a child's palm. Pressed so hard, the page buckled. Wax dripped in the center, sealing the flesh-thin parchment. He turned again. July 14th. I found them under the table. All 4. Silent hands. Folded. Leva was humming something, but her lips didn't move. I told Sister Arneth. She wouldn't come downstairs. Just said, "They're closer to God like this." Tormund backed away, slowly, but his hand stayed on the book. He couldn't put it down. He read on. July 17th. We rang the bell for hours. No one came. Arneth says the bell's not heard. Past the fjord, I think it is. I think they just stopped listening. A flicker faint, from the window. He turned. The sun had moved. Shadows bent, strange against the wall, like arms stretched across stone, like something had just risen from its chair, and didn't want to leave. Tormund's mouth was dry. He closed the book. The table was cold now. He looked again at the cups. One was cracked hairline. The milk had seeped through and left a bloom. Soft green, feathered at the edge. He reached to touch it behind him. A sound, scrape, chair leg, not his. He didn't move, didn't turn, his voice barely a whisper. Who's there? Nothing, He turned. All chairs were still, except one, pushed out just an inch. But out. He looked down at the book in his hand. There, on the back cover, something scratched into the leather. Deep, done with a nail or knife. Not words, just 4 lines. 4 tally marks, end beside them. A half line started, not finished. Carved in panic, he turned back to the journal's last entry, July 21st. I heard it. Not the children. The table, breathing. Voice is gone. I found a veil in the stove. The ink blurred here. But the last line, it hit him like cold water. If the table is still warm, do not sit. It means the hymn isn't over. Tormund dropped the book. It hit the floor with a sick, soft sound, like breath punched from lungs. The milk had curdled fully now. It cracked in the cup like broken paint. Flies gathered. Silent ones. Their wings didn't hum, they just watched. He looked up. The window was dark. No sun, no moon, just glass. And the faint reflection of 4 children, thin, waiting, their eyes hollowed into inkblots. He spun. The room was empty, but on the far wall, a painting. He hadn't seen it before. Dust-covered, crooked, a table, a chalice, and 4 small hands, blurred by age and mold. A 5th shadow behind them, tall, no face. He stared, and the wax in the center of the table began to melt. He didn't move, didn't breathe. Then a bell, far muffled, like it had been ringing for years. Beneath the floorboards, Tormund stumbled back. His voice broke as he whispered, "It's still ringing." And from beneath the table a soft breath, then the faintest hum of a hymn. That didn't end. You can still see the lines they drew. If the snow hasn't covered them yet, they're faint, like something scratched by bone. Circles, crosses. A word that isn't in any language, just sounds like breath when you say it. That was the first thing Brit saw. Not the steeple, not the black house tucked behind the ridge, just the chalk marks, trying not to be seen. She was 12 when her mother first stopped taking her to St. Britta's, just said it was too far, too cold. But it wasn't. They lived right in Vestalen. You could see the bell tower from their roof. But one Sunday, she woke to find her dress folded at the end of the bed, damp, like it had been worn in snow, then left out to dry. Her mother just said, "Hurry, we're going to Erland's." She didn't ask. She should have. The sermons weren't in a church, just a clearing, trees tight as bars, snow packed down in the middle where they'd all kneel. 31. Always 31, never more, never less. Brit counted every time. And the chalk, always chalk. Sermons written in it, circles, runes, words, but never on the stone wall or slate, only snow, always snow. Because they wrote their sermons in chalk, but always outside, where the snow could take it back. That's what Erland whispered once, when she lingered too long. He smiled when he said it, but it wasn't kind. No one ever saw where he lived. Just came up the trail every Sunday, coat buttoned wrong, teeth chattering, like they'd walked through something too old to name. He never knocked, just arrived. The old ones would bow. The younger ones wouldn't meet his eyes. Brit did, once, and he called her milkthroat. She still doesn't know why. That day, her mouth tasted like ash. They never read from scripture, just murmured. Then bled silence between them, like it was sacred. No singing, no fire, just the frost and the dull weight of the trees leaning in. And sometimes, after the last circle had melted, Erland would walk over to one of the children, press his hand on their head, say, "Hollow now." That was all. Then they'd be gone next week. Never again on the logs. She asked her mother once, "Where's Halvar?" Her mother just stirred the broth and said, "He forgot the shape." No more, no less. Halvar's house sat empty for a year. Then someone bricked the windows from the inside. One Sunday Brit tried to walk back down. She was cold, just said her stomach hurt. Her fingers were cracked from kneeling. No one stopped her, not even her mother, but halfway back to the main road. The trees were wrong. She turned around, same trees, turned again, same ones. Each time she moved, she came back to the chalk, faded now, half across, a smudge. Someone had stepped on the sermon. She tried to find the mark she knew, but they'd all melted into slush. She sat down, waited, heard it, from the earth, a thin sound, like milk crying through the stone. She doesn't remember how she got home, just that her shoes were gone, and her feet. They were so clean, a clean. After that, things blurred. Her name stopped appearing in the school book. Her cousin came to visit once, and said, "Why do you wear that?" She didn't know what he meant, just looked down at the dress. It was the only one they'd let her wear, long, grey, buttonless, stitching around the hem shaped like tiny veils. She asked her mother if she could have another. Her mother stared through her, then said, "Don't lie to me, Brit, you were never a child." She didn't ask again. Years passed like ash falling in water. No sound, just slow settling. Stopped saying the year, just the 30th winter, or since the first milk. Brit still didn't know what that meant, but then, he came back. Erland. He single quotes vanished for almost a year. They said he was fasting, speaking with stone. Brit didn't believe them. She had started to forget what he looked like. Tried to, but when he walked out from the trees, same coat, same smile. She felt it again. Her teeth ached. He called for silence, then held up a child. Couldn't have been older than 4. Naked, white veil over its eyes. Not crying. He said the child was named in reverse. Said the stone had taken milk, so now it would give blood. That they were whole. That the 31 had never broken, not once. And everyone bowed, except Brit. She stood there still, silent, watching. The chalk melt. She wanted to scream, but when she opened her mouth, no sound came out. Just cold, like breath stolen from the wrong lungs. She ran for the second time in her life. She ran from the circle. This time, no trees moved, no snow bent to trap her. She made it down the hill, but when she got to the road, it was gone. Just fields in stone. The whole parish gone. No St. Bredis. No schoolhouse. No bell. No trail. Only stones, with milk frozen in the cracks. That's what she saw. So she walked back. The clearing was empty now. No chalk. No child. Just 30 stones, stacked in a ring, and one cracked bowl, placed in the center. Inside it, a veil. Grey, damp, still warm. She reached for it, but before she touched it, she heard something. From the trees, a voice. Familiar, thin, milk-throat. She turned. No one. But when she looked back, the veil was gone, and in its place, her shoes. Too small now, but still clean. She never went back after that. They said she moved south. Married. Tried to forget, but some winters, when the chalk marks return, you can find her standing just outside the circle, barefoot. Waiting. She never speaks, just watches the snowfall. And listens. For milk, crying through the stone. They weren't supposed to go down there. That's what Father Drevik had said twice, first with a smile, then without one. If the stairs groan, turn around. If you hear breathing, it's your own. And if the floor pulls, you bless it and leave. But Jens didn't believe in that kind of talk. He believed in the wood warping from water, in draft rot, in buried guilt that just needed a flashlight and gloves. He didn't believe in haunted chapels or cursed cassocks or hymnals with bite marks, until the hatch opened on its own. He was the last one in the file, the only one who didn't smoke, the only one who noticed the nails weren't bent, just loose, like they'd given up, like they'd whispered to each other, "It's time." So when the others turned back, one coughing, one mumbling something about air quality, Jens climbed down slowly, boots testing each rung like they might scream. The smell was older than death. It wasn't rot, it wasn't mold, it was milk, sweet, but wrong. Like something poured warm and left too long. He reached the bottom. He shouldn't have. The cellar wasn't a room, it was a mouth. Stone curved above and below, walls bowing inward, like the place was exhaling. Every breath of the place was damp. There were hooks on the walls, rusted, and ropes still hanging, not from the ceiling, but the floor, coiled like worms. waiting. And there, in the center, a cassock. Child-sized. Pinned upright with iron nails through the hem, mouth sewn shut, tiny thread, red. He took one step closer, and heard it, humming, soft, faint. He froze, waited, but it didn't stop. Not a tune, just sound, like someone too small to remember the words. He crouched, his light shook. Dust rose. The cassock didn't move, but its shadow swayed, back and forth, like something inside was rocking. He didn't speak, he just reached, touched. The sleeve. It was cold, not icy, just ... recent. The fabric hadn't forgotten warmth yet. He looked closer at the mouth, threaded, shut, needle still inside, like someone had stitched it, and never finished. He looked around. The walls weren't stone, not exactly, nor like chalk, pressed to damp wood. No carvings, no scripture. Just ... handprints. Hundreds. Tiny. Some smeared. Some so perfect they looked printed. And above the cassock, one word, scratched in with something sharp, not written, unchosen. Jens backed up. His light caught something near his boot, a tooth, small, still rooted, and beside it another, and another. He followed the trail, 7 in all, like someone had left them as offerings. He turned. The cassock was humming again. But ... its mouth was still sewn shut. That's when he saw the crack, just below the left shoulder. The fabric split, barely, just enough for ... something. Movement. Not muscle. Not breath, just the smallest. Twitch. He dropped the light. It didn't go out, just rolled, stopped at a shape in the corner. Another cassock, and another cassock, and another Tevan, all upright, all sealed, some smaller than the others. One ... barely the size of a cradle. He stepped back, his foot touched rope. He looked down. The coil was shifting slowly, like it had just woken up. He turned. Too fast. His hand hit the wall. Chalk dust smeared his palm. His skin started to itch, not burn, just ... itch, like the air was wrong, like it was remembering something he'd never done. He reached again for the first cassock, needed to see inside. His fingers touched the seam, pulled the thread, stretched, snapped, just a little. The humming stopped, and then a sound, not scream, not cry, just ... teeth, clicking, like they didn't fit. He backed away, but the floor caught him, not tripped, caught. Like the wood bowed up to meet him. He fell. Hard. Face to floor, and heard it, right beneath his ear, breathing not his own. He rolled. The cassock had fallen flat now, still, but beside it ... 7 sets of footprints. Child-sized. Leading to the wall, where no door had ever been. He crawled toward them. Light flickered, and in the beam, a face, small, blanched, veiled, but the veil wasn't cloth. It was stitched skin, thin, pale. The mouth, too wide, teeth too small. Too many. And from beneath the veil she didn't cry. She hummed through teeth too small to be hers. That's what he whispered, later, but by then, they'd erased the logs, the recordings, the testimonies, called it structural myth. Bleed, said it was all theoretical. Said no children were ever listed missing. Jens never spoke again, but they say he still hums just low, just under breath, and every Sunday at dusk. The cellar door unlocks itself. Just once, just wide enough. For a child's cassock to slip through. The soil was already soft when she got there. That's what made her stop. Not the wind, or the quiet. Or even the smell. Just that the ground, in the middle of winter, gave way to easily under her heel. Signy knew this path, knew the bend in the tree where the bark split like skin, knew where the birds used to stop, before the singing stopped, and she knew this patch of earth, always frozen, always hard as bone. Not tonight. She bent down, pressed her hand to it, warm, damp, milk, warm. She didn't want to remember that word. Not here, not again. But it slipped through, like breath in a cracked tooth. Milk. She looked up. The chapel had been silent for years, roof sagging, paint peeled back to ash, cross long gone. Only the bell rope remained frayed, half buried, like it had been gnawed by something with small teeth. Said Erland Kittelson used to stand here, just here, in bare feet, in snow, with a baby's blanket over his shoulders and a lantern he never lit. They said he'd face the empty chapel, never go inside and speak backwards, Latin, or something like it. They said he'd wait for the soil to open. That word again. Signe brushed her thumb over the hollow in the earth. Something slick came up, pale. She wiped it on her skirt. Didn't look. There were no stones marking the spot, no names, but there was a bowl, ceramic, cracked down the center, filled with milk. Still warm. She stood, her breath curled out like a thread, and then she heard it humming. Not a tune, not really, just sound, almost like someone trying to cry, but remembering they weren't supposed to. She turned. The chapel door was open. It hadn't been. She didn't walk toward it. Her feet just moved, like someone had already walked this path for her. Inside nothing moved, but everything was wrong. The pews were split, some stacked, some backwards. The altar cloth was gone, replaced by a crib sheet, soaked through. The air smelled of old soap and wet wool. And behind the pulpit, a chair, rocking, no one in it, just moving, gently, back and forth, back and forth. She didn't speak, didn't blink. Then she saw it. The hymnal, open, page torn, something written between the staves in wax pencil. He preached that birth was a punishment, and silence was the womb of God. She stepped closer. A candle stub still sat in the spine of the book. Not burnt, just melted, straight through, like someone had pressed it down and waited. She reached for it. Her fingers brushed wax, and then skin. Underneath the hymnal, something soft and breathing. She pulled it back. A cassock gild, sized, veil, folded inside, milk stained, and tucked in the collar. A note, no ink, just scratches. Done. With a nail. She unfolded it, but it wasn't a note. It was a list. Names 30, all crossed out, except one, hers. She dropped it. It didn't fall. Just, stuck to her hand. She rubbed her palm on her coat. It wouldn't come off. Behind her, the chair stopped rocking, and a voice, thin, dry, whispered behind her ear. Unborn, but not forgotten. She turned. No one, but the crib sheet was gone, replaced by soil. Fresh, wet. She stepped back. Her heel caught the bowl. Milk spilled across the floor, and where it touched the pew wood, something hissed, a low crackle, like fire that couldn't find air. She ran, back down the aisle, the chapel, past the bowl, past the open soil. But the path, it was wrong, longer. The trees leaned in, and something moved in the branches. She heard the rope, swinging, back and forth, back and snap. Something hit the ground behind her. She didn't look, didn't stop. Her legs burned. The air clawed at her throat. She made it to the bend, to the tree, to the split bark. Then silence. Too much silence. The wind didn't breathe. The woods didn't creak. Just stillness. And her name, spoken low, but not by a voice, by the earth beneath her feet. She dropped to her knees, pressed her hand to the soil. Again, still warm, still soft. She dug, not deep, just enough to see a hand. Tiny fingers curled around a spoon. Not bone, not wax. Just waiting. She reached out, and something took her wrist, not hard, not cruel, just firm, like a mother guiding a child back to bed. And then, the humming again, closer now, right behind her. But when she turned, nothing, only the bowl refilled, only the cassock folded, and the list, with her name, now crossed out. They found her coat 2 days later, still warm, still damp, but she was gone. No footprints, no trail, just a chair gently rocking in the chapel. And one last thing, scribbled on the back wall in ash. They didn't bury her name, they baptized it. The diary was never meant to be read. It was stitched shut with flax thread and left beneath a hospice bed. No name on the cover, just the imprint of 2 fingers, small, child-sized, pressed hard into the leather. When they opened it, the ink inside was still wet. The first page said only, "They moved when the bells stopped, not before." Nurse Astrid Nystrom had left Bergen in December of 1925. A temporary assignment, they said. Just a few weeks at Esther, a hill parish too far from the main line to matter. She was told the children were sick with inherited silence, a form of mutism from a poor, cold lineage. Nothing contagious, nothing medical, just prayer and patience. But when she arrived, there was no patient chart, No parents. And all the children had shaved heads and matching cassocks. She wrote, they watched me through their veils, not eyes, just cloth, like milk cloth, but heavier, the kind used to strain out seeds. Astrid was 33, a rational woman, Lutheran, trained under a Bavarian physician who laughed at ghosts and cured seizures with arsenic. She didn't believe in miracles, but on her first night in the chapel, the air sweetened. It wasn't perfume, it wasn't rot, it was ... milk, sweet, too sweet, like it had been heated, then left to spoil. There were lilies, to the kind that open without light, but they weren't in vases. They grew up through the cracks in the floorboards, white, wet petals, curled like tongues. She tried to leave, her boots stuck, the floor beneath her ... breathed. She wrote, it pulsed, like a crib, rocked by something under the planks. She didn't mention the children again until the 4th entry. That's where the writing began to stutter, as if her hand didn't quite agree with what her eyes had seen. They whispered, she wrote, but not from their mouths. The next sentence had been scratched out with her nail, the indent still visible under the light. One word: stomachs. That night, she wrote that she'd stood outside the chapel after evening prayer and heard humming, but no mouths moved. The children were silent. Still, only their bellies rose and fell. She leaned close to one girl, maybe 5, maybe less, and pressed her ear to her ribs. She whispered from her stomach, but only when the bells stayed still. Astrid looked up. The bell tower had no bell. Just the rope, still swinging. She followed the sound back into the main hall. No altar now, just a table. Long, too long. The top sagged in the middle, like it had been wet too long. On it ... bowls. All the same cracked white ceramic ... and in each plus a small cloth veil, soaked through. She wrote, not with wine, not water, something thicker, something that didn't dry. She asked the sister in charge, a brittle woman with no name, just a title. More. The woman answered without lifting her eyes. Milk remembers, wine forgets. Astrid didn't ask again. Later that evening, she found the children all sitting in the nave, cross-legged, hands folded, eyes closed beneath their veils. One began to rock, another hummed, and slowly, softly, the others joined in one by one. Not harmonies, not melody, just ... sound ... low and wrong and warm in the throat. She tried to stop them, but her legs wouldn't move. She wrote, it's not paralysis, it's permission. The body just ... lets go. On the 7th day, she refused the milk. Every night, Moore brought a bowl, still warm, served it without words, without gesture, just placed it by her bed. Astrid poured it out the window. Next morning, no frost on the sill. Only footprints. Child-sized. Bare. That evening, she was moved to a new room. It faced the back of the chapel, a wall of stained glass long since shattered, patched with vellum and soot. The moon came through in slivers, lighting a single thing in the center of the floor, a crib, rocking. Empty. But the sheet inside damp, still shaped like something had been lying there. She didn't sleep. She tried, but the walls scraped all night, softly, like someone dragging fingers through milk, and under the crib, a sound, not crying, not breath, just ... chewing. She lit her lamp, leaned over. Nothing. When she pulled the sheet aside, a tooth fell out, white. Perfect. Still warm. She wrote, I don't think they were born the first time. I think they're trying again. Next morning she went to the sisters' quarters. No one there, just a veil on the pillow, and beneath it, a slip of parchment. Wet. Words smeared, but one still legible, unweaned. That's when Astrid packed her bag. She made it to the chapel door before the children blocked her path. Not angry, not violent, just ... there, standing, shoulders touching, mouths closed, bell rope swinging. She said their names. None answered. Then she heard it. From the floor, the walls, the pews, voices all together. From somewhere beneath her, soft, chanted like prayer, but not in any language she knew. She dropped her bag, ran to the back of the chapel, pulled the crib aside. There was a trapdoor underneath, no latch, no lock, just the smell. She opened it. The ladder led down, not deep, just far enough. She climbed at the bottom. A pool. Milk. Still. And in it, floating a page. Her own handwriting. From the diary. She reached for it, and the bells stopped, just like that, and then they whispered from their stomachs, but only when the bells stayed still. She froze. The milk rose. Tied dash like covering her shoes. Her ankles, her knees. She didn't scream. She just opened her mouth and let it in. They found her weeks later, or something that looked like her, in the river. Mouth. No tongue, just soaked parchment, stitched where it had been. The text bled out as it dried. They translated what they could. Only one line was clear. Milk does not forget, it waits. And still the diary leaks. No matter how many times they close it. Ink dripping slow. Like wax from a child's palm. He didn't mean to stay the night. Henrik Holm was just meant to catalogue what was left. Broken organ reeds, hymnals half fused from rot, an iron candelabrum sealed to the stone by bat droppings in time. But the sun dropped too fast. The fog came low, and the car wouldn't start, so he stayed. Slept in the chapel's old vestry. If you could call it sleep, he kept waking. But not from dreams. From stillness, the kind that pressed down too hard like breath held too long. Or a lullaby hummed underwater. The firewood was damp. The walls peeled in long curling strips. Every time he blinked, they seemed to be curling in a little more. It was 3:12 a.m. when the storm began, but he hadn't heard it coming. No wind, no branches, just snow, sudden and sideways, as if it had always been falling, just waiting to be noticed. He stepped outside, lit his lantern. The snow touched nothing. It floated, then vanished just before it hit the ground. Not melting, just deciding not to fall. He turned toward the bell tower. It wasn't supposed to be there. It had been removed according to records. Dissolved, dismantled, its bell melted into chalices. But now it stood tall, taller than it should have, black against the snow sky. At the top. Something moved. He didn't speak, didn't breathe, just stepped closer. The tower looked wrong, narrowed toward the top, like a funnel or throat. Ropes hung down its sides like veins. Veils draped the rafters, pale ones, like the kind he'd seen in old baptismal rites. They fluttered, but the air didn't move. His lantern flickered. Then the first bell rang. It didn't echo. It sank, straight, down into the soil. A second followed, then a third. 12 in all, each slower than the last. He fell to his knees, not from fear, not yet, just because the sound emptied something in him, like it rang straight through the spine, like it knew his name before he was born. That's when he saw them. Children. First, just silhouettes in the snow, still, then closer. Their feet made no prints. Their mouths moved, but no words came. He stepped back. His lantern died. The storm was loud, but not louder than the bells. He stumbled into the chapel, slammed the door, but the sound came through the wood, the stone, the marrow. He dropped to the floor, back pressed to the altar, eyes shut tight. Then the bells stopped, and the silence that followed was worse. Not quiet, not pause, just the sense of something watching. From inside the skin he looked up. The chapel windows, shattered long ago, were filled now with something new. Not glass, not frost. Just thin sheets of pressed milk-cloth, backlit by snow. And behind them faces. Children. Pressing in. Mouths closed, but he heard them low. From below, from the stone, a sound like prayer, but without language, like mourning passed down through the throat of a bell. Then came the rope. It dropped through the hole in the ceiling. Slow. Coiled. At his feet he didn't touch it, didn't breathe. Then movement. Not in the chapel, in him, something shifting inside the chest. Like his lungs had turned to soil. He stood, walked to the base of the tower, didn't remember how. The door opened for him. Dust curled around his feet like fog. Inside the staircase, splintered, rotted, but whole enough to climb. He began. Each step whispered, not creaked, whispered. Things he'd buried, things that weren't his. A hand he'd held at 6 years old that wasn't there the next day. A lullaby hummed through the walls of his childhood room. A bowl of milk placed at the foot of his bed, still warm. No one home. He kept climbing. Until he reached the top. And saw nothing. No bell. No roof. Just open sky and snow that fell upward. But at his feet, a veil. Small. Damp. Folded. He picked it up, held it to the light. Inside, a tooth, too small, too perfect, still warm. He dropped it. It didn't fall, just sank into the wood. And when he looked up again, he wasn't alone. The children stood in a ring around the tower, outside the walls, eyes closed, mouths sealed with thread. but their stomachs rose and fell, and then they sang, not with voices, not with sound, but with breath that didn't come from lungs, and the rope behind him pulled. He turned, no hands on it, just tension. He stepped back, felt the floor shift beneath him. Then all at once, the bells rang again. Once, louder than ever, and the snow stopped, frozen, mid-air, even the children still silent, until one by one, they vanished, leaving only the veils, draped across the edges of the bell tower, 30-1 in all. The next morning, the tower was gone. No prince, no snow, just a bowl of milk left where it stood, still warm, and the veil Henrik had touched, folded in his coat pocket. But when he opened it, nothing inside, just a name his written in ash. They closed the chapel windows 3 days before the fast began, not boarded them, sealed, from the inside, with wax, pale wax, poured in lines along the corners like a cradle traced in light. There was no sun left by then, only the smell, soot, sweat, and milk gone wrong. Anna was the last to arrive. Not a member, not a believer, just a girl who needed dry shoes and warmth for the night. She came with nothing but a torn satchel and her sister's name on her lips. Her sister had disappeared the winter before, after joining the ones who drank backwards. No one said the word cult. They said quiet ones. They said rehearsing saints. But when Anna stepped through the chapel doors, something turned behind her ribs. The heat in the room didn't come from fire. It came from breathing. 30 people, all kneeling, all silent, each with a black bowl in front of them, empty, glazed in soot, rimmed with frost. One figure rose, more Lisbeth, older than Anna remembered. Her habit sagged like wet cloth. Her fingers were cracked and bandaged. Still she smiled, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "You've come late," she said, her voice like old parchment. Anna nodded. She didn't say why, didn't mention her sister's name, because Lisbeth would have heard it already. It had already been whispered into the floorboards. Lisbeth took her hand and brought her to the front. There, beneath the altar, sat a cradle. No child, just ash, thick grey, layered like flour that had been sifted and forgotten. Lisbeth bent low, pressed her thumb to the ash, then touched Anna's lips. "You'll speak again after second milk," she said. Anna didn't understand. She didn't ask. Not yet. That night, the fast began. The bowls remained empty. The mouths, too. Not even breath passed between them. Only sound. Low hymns, sung in reverse, barely above a hum. The words didn't matter. The shape did. Anna sat in the back pew, hands folded, her stomach hollowed out by the hour. They didn't sleep, just swayed, rocked themselves like children with no mother to rock them. On the second day they brought out the wine. It was black, not dark red black, like it had curdled into something thicker. The smell alone made Anna's gums ache. She didn't drink. Not then. The others did. One by one, they cupped their hands. Like infants, no cups, just skin. They drank what fed them, and fed what they drank, because afterward they bled. Small drops, from the nose, the ears, the lips. And then smiles. Every one of them, even the children. Anna wanted to run, but the chapel doors were gone, just gone, replaced by veiled. White, translucent, sewn from too many hands. The third night, she dreamed of her sister naked, covered in wax, standing in a crib too small for her, and humming. When Anna woke, the wax from the windows had started to drip, thin trails like candle tears, reaching the floorboards. The bowls were still empty, but the wine had changed. Now it steamed. Lisbeth stood above it, stirring with something that wasn't a spoon, a spindle, maybe, or a rib. Anna finally asked, "What's in it?" Lisbeth didn't look at her, just said, "Memory," and lifted the bowl. Anna drank. She didn't mean to, but her hands didn't ask. Permission. The taste. It wasn't wine, it wasn't anything. It was reminder of her sister's breath on her cheek, when they shared a cot, of her mother's hand gripping her wrist during storms, of a lullaby she hadn't heard since she was 5, the one her sister used to hum when their mother went silent. It tasted like belonging, and after, she wept, and no one stopped her because weeping was allowed. Words were not. On the fourth day, the second milk, the cradle was moved to the center of the chapel. The ash inside was stirred with bare hands. Then the children came forward. Each carried a hymn book. Each placed it into the ash, not laid gently, pressed hard until the ash rose over the cover, swallowing the song. One child lingered. Veil askew. Hands trembling. Anna recognized her. Her sister's coat, too small now, but it was hers. Anna stood, but no one else moved. Not Lisbeth, not the others, not even the child. The hymnal dropped into the cradle, and the ash hissed. Anna stepped forward. The child turned. Veil fell. It wasn't her sister, but her face, her eyes. They were humming. Not her mouth, her eyes. Anna collapsed, not from fear, from hunger, from knowing. They helped her up, placed her hands into the ash, pressed them flat, and then, one last bowl, filled with wine the color of marrow. She drank, not because she wanted to, because her mouth remembered it, because her stomach had been waiting for it since birth. The others sang low, backwards. The veil over the door lifted just once, and snow came. In soft unseen, Anna saw her sister in the wind, naked, covered in wax, smiling behind her. The cradle empty now, except for a hand, still moving, rocking the ash. Anna stepped forward, pressed her fingers to the soot, felt something grip her back. Not hard, not cruel, just hungry. And the song didn't end, not when the snow stopped, not when the candles drowned in their own wax, not even when Anna whispered her sister's name and heard 30 voices say it back, not from their mouths, but from somewhere deeper. Where names go to be eaten and born again. Her bowl was found, decades later, still warm, still wet, and filled with a veil, drawn tight over a page that simply read, "She never spoke again." But the stains on her bed never left. He found it by accident, that's what he told himself. A hymnal too heavy, its spine stitched wrong, leather too soft, pages too thick. The rest were brittle from age, song titles flaking like ash. But this one was warm. Auden had already spent 3 weeks inside the archive house, his hands cracked, his throat filled with dust, his dreams made brittle by the things he was not allowed to read. They gave him gloves and rules. Don't copy the marginalia. Don't record past page 103. If a child's name appears more than once, do not say it aloud. He followed those rules. Until the hymnal, it was mislabeled, processional, 1871. The title etched in gold thread, not ink. He opened it. First page blank, second blank, then ... Not music, not notes, just columns, dates, tiny drawings. A thumbprint in milk. He turned another page. The ink changed. Red. Now ... The handwriting smaller, denser. Like whoever wrote it had grown afraid of space. Or light ... at the top. Failed vessels. Do not return to page 1. Auden didn't breathe. He turned the page anyway. Inside, names ... dozens, none, listed in the baptismal registry. He checked 3 times ... He read them aloud in his head, slowly. Then the sound, soft, from the ceiling, like chain dragged through soot ... He looked up ... Just beams, and something dangling. A veil ... Child, sized, torn in half, stuck to the timber with melted wax. He turned back to the ledger. On the next page, drawings, cribs filled with teeth, hymnals sewn shut. Tiny hands holding ropes made of hair, and beneath each one, a line of scripture that didn't exist. Or maybe it did, but not here. Not in the books anyone was still allowed to touch. Auden didn't write anything down, but he remembered, each line etched behind, his eyes like frost on a pane. They were never born, only swallowed. Do not teach them the bell. Crib, ash, veil, bowl, repeat until reverse. He felt the room bend, not tilt, bend, as if time itself was softening around the ledger. He closed it, but it didn't feel closed. His hands trembled. He placed it back where he found it, behind the locked cabinet marked Coral Overflow. But the lock was gone now, just hanging split in 2. He left the room, walked down the stairs, didn't notice the wax under his boots until the 3rd step, didn't smell the milk until he reached the door, didn't realize the bells were silent until it was too quiet to leave. He stood on the chapel threshold, the door still open, fog low, snow starting. And then he turned. The lights in the archive had gone out. Only one thing still glowed, the hymnal. Open. Again page curled, and on it, his name, written in wet ink. He hadn't written it, but it was his, and below it, a sketch, not crude, not quick. A figure veiled, with a bowl in place of a head. Inside the bowl, milk. Inside the milk, A reflection. He stepped back. Foot hit something. The rope stretched across the floor like a vein, leading to the altar, leading up. He followed it. Didn't mean to, just moved, like something already remembered this. Step. He reached the altar. The cradle was gone, but the ash remained, pressed into a tight circle, black as him ink, and at the center the hymnal, again closed. Now but breathing. He swore it. It rose, it fell. He knelt, touched the spine. Hot. He opened it. One last page. Just for words. It wasn't a journal. It was a recipe for never being born. The lights flickered, the chapel doors slammed shut, and from beneath the floorboards, a sigh, too soft to chase, too heavy to forget. Auden placed his hand to the page again, felt it, twitched, felt it, open. From within, a child's voice, not spoken, not heard, just felt like breath on the inside of the skull. Don't name me yet. I'm not ready. He tried to speak. His tongue stuck. His breath fogged the page. Words bloomed beneath it. Words he couldn't read, couldn't look away from. Then silence again. And the lights out. They found him the next morning. Hymnal closed, page blank, except for a smear of milk. And on the far wall, scratched through soot and wax. They didn't bury her name. They baptized it. No one talked about the births anymore. They just said the frost came early, or the milk didn't hold. But Carrie knew better. She remembered the first one that didn't cry. Pale as bone, fingers curled around nothing, mouth closed like it had never learned how to open. It was winter, but the child was warm, too warm. She wrapped it in linen anyway. She was the only midwife left by then, the others having gone mute, or mad, or simply walked into the marsh, barefoot and face down. She stopped using the birthing tools. There was no use for them. The mothers had stopped screaming. The children had stopped happening. Instead came the dolls. They were crude at first. Burlap sacks, stitched too fast, salt poured inside until it bled through. Later, they added teeth, little wooden ones, carved by candlelight, smoothed with spit, and tucked into sewn mouths like communion. They swaddled them just the same, held them just the same, sang over them, even not lullabies, hymns, but reversed. They made cradles from coffins, but no one noticed. The chapel accepted them. That's what Carrie said, half to herself, half to the shadows that hung just above the rafters. They take what's offered, and in Astor offering was survival. That winter, the river froze solid by All Saints' Eve. The bells hadn't rung in months, but Carrie still heard them. At night, always at 3:10, not from the tower, from beneath the floorboards. She didn't ask that. She just lit another taper and kept stitching. The dolls grew more detailed, some with wax faces, some with soot-rubbed eyes. One mother had used her own braid for hair, another had placed a veil kite-sized, milk-soaked, over the doll's face, and called it a mercy. There were records, of course, hidden ones. Carrie kept them in a box beneath her cot, wrapped in muslin and regret. She stopped writing full names, just initials, and a note beside each. Silent, no sound, did not arrive. The priest came once a month, not to bless the infants, to weigh the dolls. He brought a scale, wooden, cracked. If the doll was heavier than 3 stones of salt, it was buried. If lighter, it was burned. Carrie didn't ask what happened to the ashes. She knew the hearth stayed warm without wood. The chapel smelled of bone broth and beeswax. She wrote, "It is easier this way than hearing them cry from the walls." And they did. Some nights, through the stone, whimpers at first, then chewing, like gums gnashed against teeth that weren't there yet. One morning she woke to a doll on her chest, not hers, different thread, different eyes, a mouth that had been unstitched, and inside, salt, blackened and wet. She burned it. The next day, another appeared, larger, smiling. She stopped sleeping, stopped weighing, stopped weighing, just watched the cradle in the center of the chapel, the one that hadn't been touched in a year, and waited for it to move. It did. 3 days later, a slow rock, no wind, no hands, just rhythm. And when she checked inside, just soot, but shaped, like a body had lain there and vanished without moving. That night, the priest came again, but different, younger, no collar, just robes, thick, heavy. He didn't knock, didn't speak, just handed her a cloth bundle and pointed toward the hearth. Inside, A doll, but this one, ... It blinked ... once. Carrie dropped it. The salt spilled, soaked red. She looked up. The priest was gone, so was the door. Only veil now hung with tiny bells. None of them rang, but she heard them. All the same inside her, in her teeth, behind her ribs. She picked up the doll, cradled it, sang to it, and felt it grow. Warm, not with breath, with memory. It knew her name, it whispered it without sound. She placed it in the coffin cradle, pulled the veil over its face, and said, "You are real enough." The candles dimmed, the salt hissed, the chapel walls cracked, and the dolls in the rafters, the ones they thought too small to count, began to hum. One by one. Low. Through wooden teeth that never learned how to chew. They found Carrie in the spring, thaw mouth stitched shut, palms raw, eyes gone, but smiling, and under her cot. A ledger, soaked through, unreadable, except one line, scratched into the wood with a salt-stained nail. They didn't want to be born, only remembered. The stone was still warm when he touched it, not with sunlight. There hadn't been any that week. The fog hadn't lifted since he crossed into Vestfold, not even for breath. But the chapel's threshold had a pulse. Rune Nyberg, archivist, sent by the Cultural Preservation Office, didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in omissions, in gaps between ink and truth, in the way Oldwood remembered things long after the church forgot them. He stepped through the door, brushing aside hanging veil rope that didn't belong on any official inventory. There was no crucifix, no chalice, no pews, only the whole. It wasn't hidden, just ... waiting. A square carved into the stone floor, framed in black wax. No cover, no altar, just silence and the faint sound of dripping or humming. He checked the schematic. No substructure listed, but the floor had been rebuilt twice. Once in 1930, once again in 1976. The invoice noted re-leveling due to subsoil softness. He stepped closer. It didn't smell like stone. It smelled like breath and milk. There was a rope rotted wet, knotted with ribbons, names stitched into the fibers, all different, all female. Some were scratched out. One name was written over and over, then burned through. Astrid. Rune set his recorder on the ledge, hit playback. Nothing. He tried again. Static, then something fainter. Lullaby, not sung. Hummed. Through something soft. Like cloth in the mouth. He climbed down. The air changed halfway. Warmer, denser. The walls weren't stone anymore. They were salt, flesh-pressed salt, pocked like old teeth. Wax dripped along the edges, sealing names into crevices. More than names, phrases. She must not wake. Fed but not full. Milk beneath, soil above. Rune reached the bottom. His boots touched earth, but not dry. Earth. It gave a little like skin. He raised his flashlight. The cavity was round, maybe 12 feet across, and at the center glass, a pane set into the ground, fogged on the inside. Beneath it. Movement. He crouched, wiped it gently. H-shaped. Small. A girl veiled, barely breathing, but breathing. Her chest rose then fell, so slow it almost didn't seem real. Then her hand. Twitched, not random, reaching. He gasped and her breath fogged the glass from underneath the stone. He scrambled backward, hand over his mouth. The lullaby continued. No words, just the sound of something forgotten rocking itself to sleep. He should have left, but the veil beside the girl's face was stitched open, and underneath her mouth, sewn but split, and from it something, poking out a scrap of paper, pressed to her teeth. Rune fumbled with gloves, peeled it out. It tore halfway, but the words were still there. Anchor the milk. His stomach turned. The wax along the walls had started to melt upward, dripping. In reverse. Like the warmth below was pulling it in. He stood. The lullaby stopped. Glass. Cracked, not shattered, just a thin line down the middle. Like something behind it had flexed. He backed toward the ladder, but it was gone. The rope burned away. No smoke, just ash. A voice whispered behind him, so soft, it might have been memory. She's not hungry yet. He spun. Nothing. But the glass now showed two shapes, Astrid and another. Beside her. Tall. Veiled. Not breathing. Just watching. Rune reached for the recorder, still static, but beneath it. His own voice. Distorted. She didn't die. They folded her. He dropped it. ran his hand along the salt wall, felt heat in the seam. He pressed it, gave way, and behind it wood, carved like a crib, charred, inside, inside, 7 teeth, not full grown, filed smooth, each wrapped in cloth, each labeled, with a name rune recognized from the hymnals. No one was allowed to sing anymore. One tooth pulsed, like it remembered. He stepped back. The cavity began to hum again, low, faint, but layered. A chorus, all humming the same lullaby, and Astrid's hand lifted. She tapped the glass, once, then again, her mouth moved, no sound, just the shape of a name, his rune, he turned, ran to the wall, felt the cradle groan, felt the salt start to soften, felt the stone above them shift, the veil rope at the threshold, frayed. The church shuddered, and from far above a bell, not struck, not pulled, just awakened. He whispered, "I didn't mean to," but the veil fell over the hole, sealing him in, and from below a breath, right beside his ear, not hers, older male. "We didn't bury her, we planted her." The glass shattered. He didn't scream, only wept, as 30 voices sang his name in lullaby, backward, until it became silence again, and the cavity filled with milk. The first thing she forgot was the sound of her own name. It slipped out of her mouth one morning in the mirror, soft, half-spoken, and just, didn't come back. She saw her lips move, felt the air leave, but it landed wrong, too thick, too wet, like it got caught in something. Eleonora didn't speak it again, not even to herself. She kept the name folded in her pocket on a damp piece of paper, just in case. That was years after she left Esther, or tried to. Her boots crossed the town line, but something inside her never did. Something rooted beneath the tongue, behind the teeth. No one warned her how long it would take. No one warned her what silence costs. She woke most nights gasping, milk in her throat, but no cup on the table, her sheets soaked, the hum of old hymnals pulsing through the radiator like distant lungs. At first, she thought it was grief, then memory, then punishment, but it wasn't any of those. It was remembering too soon. The others had waited, grown still, quiet, mouths shut so long they forgot how to open. Not her. She had told someone, just once, and she paid for it. She tried again years later. A doctor, a good one, soft eyes, careful fingers. She said nothing at first, just drew the symbols on the inside of her forearm. 5 of them, simple, crooked the way they used to appear in the chapel's cloth when no one was looking, the way they bled through salt and didn't burn. He asked her what they meant. She opened her mouth, then froze, because to speak it aloud was to swallow her name and choke on it. The air thickened, her jaw clenched, her lips moved, and something watched from behind the fluorescent light, from the water pipe beneath the sink, from the space between each of her breaths. She collapsed. No seizure, just stillness. She never saw the doctor again. She left that night. Her mouth wouldn't close properly for a week, like it remembered. Something she didn't. The symbols stayed, darkened, then healed, then darkened again. They only faded when she stopped sleeping, so she didn't. For 21 days the number mattered. Everything in Ace came in 7s. 7 bells, 7 cribs, 7 days before the milk went black. That last one she remembered best. The altar bowl. It had been warm. She held it in her hands, while the others sang backward, and Astrid lay beneath the floor, breathing, waiting. The D told her Astrid wasn't dead, that her breath anchored the doctrine, that silence kept her sleeping. But if you spoke it, if you named it, before it settled, the milk curdled, and Astrid stirred. Eleonora had whispered once, by mistake, only a name, not Astrid's, just her own. But it was enough. The bowl shattered, the milk rose, and the chapel screamed. No sound. Just wait. The kind that pulls skin off bone. She hadn't returned since, not in body, but her dreams kept the veil. Each one came the same. A white hallway, a hymn played backward, a door made of milk glass, and behind it, her veiled, smiling, hands stitched into prayer. Some nights, she woke with a hymn in her teeth. Other nights, she found salt on her windowsill. Once, just once, she woke to find her mouth filled with soot. Not ash. Not dirt. Soot. Thick, soft, familiar. She wept, and the window wept with her. Glass fogged from the outside. She checked the lock. It was sealed, but on the inside pain. A breath mark, small tiled, dash-sized. She ran her hand across it, and her fingers came away wet. It smelled like lilies and milk. She didn't open the window again, not after that. Instead, she carved the symbols deeper, not just the 5, but all 7, along her thighs, across her back, a circle around her navel. She said it was for protection, but it was permission. She needed them to remember that she hadn't meant to leave, only to escape. There's a difference. The day the humming stopped, she knew it was time. She packed one bag, walked barefoot to the chapel. No one stopped her. The doors had long since vanished, replaced with veil, stitched from old habit sleeves and baptism cloth. She stepped through it, and the air changed again like lungs. Relearning grief. The pews were dust, the cradle gone. Only the altar bowl remained. Full now, milk thickened to syrup. At the center. A tooth, small. Perfect. Carved. She touched it, and the bowl pulsed. She heard it then, beneath her feet. Breath, still there, still waiting. She sang, not aloud, not with voice, with memory, and it was enough. The ground opened, the veil lifted, and Astrid breathed again. One long inhale, followed by a hum. Then Eliora smiled and stepped forward. She didn't speak, just bowed, hands folded, veil pulled low. Her breath slowed, then stilled. She didn't scream, she didn't fight. She just returned to the space she'd never left. They found her body days later, mouth stitched shut, hands tied in prayer. 7 runes carved into her spine. And across the chapel wall, scorched in soot. They didn't bury her name, they drank it. The file wasn't supposed to exist. That's what Lena told herself as she keyed in the 8th override code. She'd spent 12 years in the pontifical archives, most of them deep in the scriptorium's digital vaultware. Nothing was ever truly deleted, only misnamed and renamed again until even God stopped looking. Her job was metadata, cross-referencing liturgical scans, tagging relic receipts, rebuilding timelines that Vatican auditors had long since redacted. And she was good at it. She entered the wrong hymn number. Not wrong, just misplaced, HG76B. She'd been searching for a 13th century Eucharistic psalm. Instead, she found a file labeled Ixt Theological Classification, Esther, Doctrinal Dispute, Sect Infancia restricted until 2135. There was no preview, only a blinking line and a warning, digitization prohibited. But beneath it, a second line flickered once, then vanished. Some meals rot, others wait. She clicked again, and the hymnal page opened. Not a song, a diagram, the outline of a table, long, uneven, with 4 plates, each annotated with the same phrase. Too soon. Lena scrolled. More diagrams, a child's jawbone mapped like a relic, hand with 7 fingers stitched into a prayer shape, a cradle split into thirds, one segment labeled breath, another sound, the last just milk. She should have stopped, but the page kept responding, like it had waited. The hymnal changed again, no longer diagrams now. Photos. Black, dash and dash white, smeared from age or something older. One showed a veil, hung over a child's crib. The veil had something written on it, but not in ink. Soot. Double quotes. She didn't cry. She listened. Another image, a communion cloth folded in a chalice, the rim blackened, symbols burned into the threads, runes, the same 5 carved into the girl from the oral testimony sealed in box 88. Lena recognized them. She had traced them herself during inventory last fall. Said nothing they had felt. Warm. She closed the file. Tried to. The window wouldn't respond. Another image loaded. A table again, but different. This time. Set. Cups filled. For chairs. Empty, but one was still pulled out, and beside it, a bowl, steam rising. Milk. She leaned closer. Inside the bowl, a reflection, not hers. Someone younger, veiled. Eyes open. Eyes open, smiling. The screen flickered. A prompt appeared. Confirm plate movement. She froze, and the air around her changed. The archive lights dimmed just slightly, but enough. A hum, deep, bone level, moved through the floor. She looked down. Wax. A drip just below her desk, still warm. Another drop fell from nowhere onto her palm. She gasped. The screen flashed. Plate confirmed. Her chair shifted, not by much, just a scrape, like someone had pushed it closer to the table. Her ears rang. Then the audio triggered. A file labeled a -kit-wax-009 no. Transcript. Just 6 seconds of something low and distorted. A lullaby, warped by time, but clear enough. A child's breath, slow, rhythmic, and one hum, too long, too soft to belong to anything living. Lena covered her mouth, not from fear, from instinct, because something was watching now, not from the hallway, from the terminal, from the screen, from behind the reflection that wasn't hers. The final line blinked into place. The table is warm again. Someone's moved the plates. She reached for the power button, but the lights shut down. All of them, and from the corner of the vault, a voice. Low, cracked. It's your turn to eat. The monitor burned out, but the warmth stayed. Not electrical, not ambient. Bodily. Something behind her exhaled, and a child's handprint pressed against the monitor's dark glass. From the inside, it smeared down slowly, leaving behind milk and ash. She never came back. Her keycard was found on her chair, still warm, still damp, and on the wall behind the server bank, scratched into the metal with something soft. They didn't bury the archive, they fed it. They said the wine would keep her quiet, that it would preserve what innocence had not yet been spoken through her teeth. But silence, like wine, only sours when left too long in the dark. The table had not been touched since the last sacrament. Dust in the cups, flies embalmed in droplets of clotted red. Sister Theophane stood at the threshold like a mourner late for the burial, veil trembling slightly from the draught that moaned beneath the chapel door. Her breath clouded faintly in the cool, cellar-like air, though it was summer above. This part of the abbey had always been colder, as if it had decided, long ago, to forget the sun. Her hands were ungloved. That was new. She moved toward the table, her hem gathering soot and old candle wax from the flagstones. One of the chairs, the smallest one, was askew, as if someone had fled, or perhaps only shifted mid-prayer, in a way the others had not dared. Theophany reached out, touched its back, and then slowly corrected it, as if realigning a child's limbs in a crib. The chalices gleamed dully, pewter, some chipped. One bore a faint smear of lipstick no one had dared remove. Her fingers hovered above it. The air was thick with a sweet, tannic perfume, the memory of grapes pressed under veils, of communion left along unstirred. Somewhere, water dripped, or was it wine? She had been a child here once, not remembered, not documented. Like so many of them, the memory came not as vision, but as weight, a sick weight, low in the spine, where the fear lives before it has words. She remembered the songs they'd sing as they carried the wine to the crypt, how the hymn always ended on the same note, left unresolved. How Sister Morel used to say that to swallow without chewing was to preserve the soul, unbroken. It was the only rule they never wrote down. The cloth on the table had frayed since last she saw it, stitched with lilies that had yellowed like teeth. A single candle had melted into the wood beside the child's cup, its wax forming a pale handprint across the grain, not poured, not accidental, deliberate, like a blessing withheld. Her eyes caught it, then something ivory caught in the lip of the smallest chalice. At first, she thought it was a bead, or a knot of bone. But no, it was a tooth, small, worn, still rooted with a sliver of dried pink where the gum had torn. The enamel shimmered faintly, too intact for accident. She did not touch it. Instead, she sat. The chair creaked as it always had, groaning like something that wanted to forget what it had borne. Her knees remembered the posture before she did. The table smelled of vinegar and iron. Her palms splayed slowly across the cloth, fingertips catching on ancient crumbs, fragments of wax, and just once something softer, a curl of blonde hair, no longer anchored to a scalp. She closed her eyes. The ritual had not always been cruel. That was the lie. It had always been cruel, just not always called so. They used to lift the children by the waist, swing them gently to laugh, then hush them, then press the chalice to their lips as if offering milk. It was always the smallest girl, never twice. The wine, they said, must be mixed with purity unknowing. She had once watched the abbess whisper into a girl's mouth, breathing the hymn through her teeth like smoke. And the girl, was it Jacette, was it Lenny, had smiled, then sank into the cup. She smiled, then sank into the cup. The stain remained. No scrubbing lifted it. The nuns simply covered it with linen, then thicker linen, eventually a velvet runner. They never replaced the cup. To do so, they said, would be to unthread the sacrament. Theophane opened her eyes. The room had darkened. No candles had been lit, and yet the shadows moved as if candlelight danced from within the stone. A hymn, barely audible, pressed at the edges of hearing, just breath and vowels. Familiar, sung from memory long suppressed. Her gaze slid to the icons above the altar, cracked, paint flaking like old scabs. One had no eyes, another held a bleeding crib. In the dimness, they looked less like saints and more like warnings. The glass above them was shattered in a pattern that had once been a rose. Now it only resembled a scream. Theophane stood slowly. Her bones ached as if they remembered kneeling too long on frozen stone. She took the child's cup in both hands. It was light, lighter than it should have been. Inside, the wine had dried to a resinous ring, nearly black. The tooth gleamed in the center, like a relic laid to rest. She thought of the records, sealed in oak drawers, stamped with wax from a ring no one wore anymore. She thought of the list, of names that ended abruptly in 1889, the year the well was bricked, the year the bells stopped ringing at midnight, the year Sister Morale was taken to the sanatorium, barefoot, whispering, "The soul stays if you don't break it." She lifted the cup to her nose. The scent was sour, sharp, cloying. Under it milk or something like it. She did not drink, but she did not lower the cup. There was a mirror, once hidden behind the altar, that had been covered since the fire. She turned now toward where it had been. Her own reflection swam faintly in the blackness of the glass holder. Veiled mouth, stained, a sound barely more than breath curled from behind her. Not a voice, just a syllable, or a sob. She turned nothing, but the chair had moved. The child's chair, it now faced the table. Pulled slightly forward, as if invited again, Theophane looked to the cup. The tooth was gone. She did not move, only the faintest sound of dripping returned, as steady as blood down a stone basin. A thread of wax curled from the candle into a child's name. Faint, illegible. She had once been that name, or maybe only carried it. She placed the cup back where it had been, aligning it precisely. Then, for the first time since the last sacrament, she smiled and let the veil fall over her face. The icons watched somewhere. Beneath the chapel, a rope was being pulled. No bell answered. This record was sealed by the local diocese in 1889. No explanation, given some meals never end. They just fall silent. But if you wait long enough, you'll hear the chewing again beneath the walls. Beneath the wood, the trees leaned inward, their limbs like arms twisted in prayer or refusal. Snow had long since melted, but no buds showed. Only bark, black with rain and centuries of silence. The Astor dining hall sat at the forest's edge, half swallowed by rot. Its stone walls buckled inward, moss-veined windows breathing in the fog. The front door, though warped, never creaked. It opened like a throat already ready. Father Laurent stood at its threshold, not yet stepping in. His cassock dragged against wet leaf and soot. Behind him, the young archivist held the equipment, sound meters, magnetic reels, sacramental salt. He didn't speak, not out of reverence, but because he'd been warned. No words until the microphones were buried. The older priests had said, it once held a convent, or a sanatorium, or a punishment school. The paper trail fractured, fire, merging orders. A bishop gone blind. And then nothing. The table remained. Even from the doorway, it stretched impossibly long, a spine of wood ending. Where light failed, 18 seats on either side, one grander at the head, though its velvet was eaten to lace. Plates set, bread, petrified, cracked like old tombstone etchings. Silverware darkened with oxidation, cups overturned, all but two. One of those cups still held a liquid too dark for wine. A film skimmed its surface, iridescent like oil or bruised milk. No animal ever entered. No birdsong lingered. They had reviewed the footage. Cameras left overnight returned always intact, clept for the audio. Every morning a new reel. Always the same sound beneath the static, humming, low, female, tuneless, and under it, like bone beneath skin, a voice, "I'm not done eating." Laurent stepped inside. The archivist didn't follow. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of split grain and wet limestone. The tablecloths had fused with the wood in places. Mildew frozen mid-bloom. He made the sign of the cross, not from faith, but to feel his own arms move. The long windows let in only diffused light, pale and flickering through laced curtains that had once been altar cloths. They looked like veils now, tattered, whispering against the glass. One of them bled faintly at the hem, stained with something that had dried rust brown. A child's fork lay on the floor beneath the leftmost chair. Its prongs had been filed blunt. The handle was carved with the letter MMIC. Feedback trembled. Behind him, one of the reels, catching breath. Laurent did not turn. He advanced to the third chair from the end. A candle stub remained beside it, wick sunken into wax like an eye turned inward. The chair was smaller than the others. He remembered this, though no one had told him. There had always been one too small. On the table beside the plate, something faintly crusted, not food. It resembled communion wafer, only thicker, more porous, teeth marks visible, uneven, ragged, as if someone had chewed, then stopped. Not from fullness, from watching he did not sit. Instead, he set the recorder on the plate. The static began instantly. He adjusted the dial. Beneath the hiss breath, no wind, no wires, just something exhaling in an unbroken line. Then a voice, faint, but unmistakable in cadence, old, female. A whisper dragged across the vowels. She's still chewing, just slower now. His hands did not tremble. He had trained for this, but his throat dried like bread left for mourning birds. Across the room, a slow creak, wood settling, or something else. Laurent moved toward the high-backed chair at the head of the table. It bore symbols carved into its legs, indistinct from a distance closer. They resembled mouths, not faces, not saints, just mouths open in varying stages of prayer or scream. The velvet seat was damp. As he reached out, something caught his wrist. It was the light. A single shaft through the rafters had bent itself to illuminate the cup beside the chair. Inside, suspended in near black liquid, a small, pink object, not moving, but soft-looking, a tongue. It had not decomposed. He closed the lid on the recorder. Silence returned, but only in the ears. The walls had begun a soft groaning, as if remembering what it had once held. His eyes flicked to the hearth sealed with brick, but blackened at the edges. Above it, a single portrait. Though the face had been slashed through, only the mouth remained, still smiling. A smudge of dried wax trailed down from the lips, as if melted from within. Something wet shifted underfoot. Laurent looked down. The floorboards had swelled with moisture. One of them bent slightly beneath his shoe. He knelt, ran a hand across it. It bowed again, not hollow. He pulled the mic cord taut and slid the recorder closer. The floor sang, not music, a resonance. As if beneath the wood, something echoed his breath, just a half-second late, mimicking, mocking. He pressed his palm down hard, chewing so faint it could have been mistaken for leaves. But no, this was rhythm, grit, moist, deliberate. She never spoke again, but the stains on her bed never left. The phrase came from nowhere, or maybe from an older report. The tapes they'd been forced to destroy. He couldn't recall which girl it had belonged to. None had names, just letters, and dates when they stopped answering roll. A breeze stirred his collar. He turned too fast, and the room tilted briefly. At the far end of the table, a single plate had shifted. The bread was gone. He walked toward it slowly, each step releasing a scent older than rotash, milk. Hymnals kept shut too long. When he reached the plate, the indent where the bread had been still steamed faintly. A bite mark notched the silver rim, not fresh, not ancient either. A thin film of saliva glistened across the spoon. He reached for the chair. Underneath it, a small, neatly folded cloth bundle waited, child-sized. Unwrapped, it revealed a bib embroidered with the word Marsua, frayed at the corners, a stitch missing. He pressed it to his chest without knowing why, as if it had once belonged to someone who remembered him. He heard her before he saw, not walking, not arriving, just present, at the seat beside him. A small figure, not child, not adult, wearing something too large for her. A garment that had once been ceremonial but now dragged like mourning, veiled. But the veil didn't fall, it clung, as if stitched to her face. She tilted toward the plate, slowly, with ritual, and placed her hands on either side. The sound resumed, chewing. Hewing, wet, slow, unashamed. He couldn't see her mouth, but her shoulders moved slightly with each bite, not downward, forward, a little pull, a little grind. He stepped back, one, then another. She did not stop. At the recorder, the static began to rise. Beneath it, the humming. Under the hum, another voice, not the girl. something older, speaking in the cadence of prayer, but not in any known tongue. Then clear, she's still chewing, just slower now. The bread was gone. Every plate on the table now bore bite marks. He didn't run, not yet. He made it to the threshold before he turned. The girl had not moved, but the veil was gone. In its place, nothing, no mouth, no face, just a smooth expanse. Still, she chewed. He shut the door behind him. The archivist was gone. Only the trees remained, leaning closer now. This footage was recovered after the collapse of Astor in 2007. The long table was found intact, bread petrified, silverware untouched, but the microphones, each one had recorded the same final whisper, "I'm not done eating." Some remnants arrived not as evidence, but as offerings, the kind meant to be opened with gloves and dread. Not everything buried was meant to stay lost. The envelope arrived without postmark, without return address, wrapped in waxed linen and sealed with a button from a child's smock. The handwriting was thin, careful, as if the sender feared the paper would bruise. Inside was cloth once white, now seared to a ruinous grey. Ash clung to its folds, and the scent, once released into the air, was immediate and unbearable. Sour milk, sandalwood, and something older, something that lived in the spine. He didn't recognize the veil at first. Only when it slipped from his hands and hit the floor with the sound of dry breath did he kneel and begin to remember. Not as memory, but as nausea. Beneath the veil was a rattle, not a modern one. Bone handle, bell cracked. Its sound had long since failed. Only a dry shuffle remained, like moth wings in a tin box. It had teeth marks, small ones, too many. He lived alone now, the last of the investigators, if they could be called that. No one had returned to Astor since the fire, not officially. The chapel had collapsed inward, dragging the bell and most of the records down with it. Only stone and soot remained, and something in the earth that no root dared touch. But this was untouched. He laid the veil out on the kitchen table. Light from the window struck it in two places, one where the cloth had been burned through entirely, forming a perfect circle no larger than a child's eye, the other where something had been written, faint, scorched into the fabric, as though by the breath of a candle. She heard you open it. The floor beneath him creaked, not under weight, under memory. The smell of sandalwood thickened, became familiar. It had been used in the mortuary oils at Astor. He remembered the sisters rubbing it into the skulls of the stillborn, speaking in whispers too soft to carry meaning, just rhythm, a lullaby for the bones. He turned the rattle once in his hand. The teeth marks followed no pattern, just desperation. It was then that he heard it, the hum, faint, from the corner of the room. No speaker played, no wind moved, but it threaded through the space between his ribs. Female, wordless, and beneath. An old rhythm, wooden, rocking. He turned to the window. Outside, the forest that had grown thick, where Astor once stood, barely stirred. No birds, no insects, only the trees, watching. He returned to the veil, lifted it once more. Something fine fell from within it like dust, but darker. He spread it carefully. Not dust, ash, in the folds. Pressed like petals between book pages were tiny fragments of paper, torn, wet once, then dried. One bore the half-inked edge of a baptismal seal, another the name Miral written in childish hand, then crossed out with thread, not ink, thread. He brought the fabric to his nose again. The smell made him flinch. Under the kitchen light, new details emerged, stitching along the hemline, uneven, frantic. Thread made not of cotton, but hair, blonde, darkened with soot. A loop had been tied at the corner, not for hanging, for pulling, like a bell rope. Like a noose. He left the table and crossed the room, retrieving the old tape recorder they'd used on the final day inside the chapel. Most of the reels had been destroyed or corrupted. One had refused to stop recording, even when unplugged. He inserted the veil into the player's carry case, pressed record, and waited. The hum began again, louder this time, almost melodic, as if the veil remembered the choir. Then, the rattle sounded, but it was still in his hand. He looked down. It was not moving, not cold, not warm, just there. The sound had come from the table, from inside the veil. The lights flickered. He pressed stop. Rewound. Played. Silence. Then the veil unfurled on its own, soundlessly. The recording captured it not as motion, but as breath. A child's breath, caught at the moment before speech. Then not everything buried was meant to stay lost. The voice did not belong to the living, nor entirely to the dead. It held the cadence of someone who had waited too long to be spoken of, someone for whom language had become hunger. The rattle sounded again, louder. The table shook. The ash began to drift upward. It did not fall, it rose, coiling like incense. On the far wall, the mirror long covered was no longer veiled. He did not remember uncovering it. In its reflection, the kitchen looked exactly as it was, save for the woman. She stood behind him, veiled thin, head tilted. Like a question, she did not speak. She simply placed one ash-covered hand on the back of his chair and waited. He turned, but the space behind him was empty. When he looked back at the mirror, the veil now hung from the reflection's neck, tied too tightly. The rattle dropped from his hand. It rolled across the floor, hit the baseboard, and stopped. But the sound kept going. He went to the window. The trees were closer now, bending inward. One of them moved. No, swung. A rope, empty. But beside it something small, wrapped in cloth, swayed, gently crib-sized. No cradle, just a bundle. A hymnless lullaby. He returned to the table. The veil was gone. Only the scent remained. The recorder clicked. A new voice. She never spoke again. But the stains on her bed never left. He stood still. The kitchen light, shattered. Darkness took its place. This is the final known recording from the Astor Investigation Archive. The chapel is gone. The forest refuses entry. But weeks later, this package arrived. Scorched veil, rattle, inside, and a single phrase, burned into cloth. She heard you open it. There is silence, and there is silencing. One is a prayer, the other, a closing hand. They have confused the two for far too long. The screen flickered before the upload began. Nothing strange, not at first, just the soft blue pulse of a tired monitor, the cursor dragging through tired code. The narrator had done this a dozen times, each entry growing quieter, less edited, closer to confession. Viewers said the pacing was haunting. He never replied. It wasn't performance. It was grief made visible. Tonight's file was labeled, simply, no more bells. Outside, the snow had not melted for 3 days, though the forecast swore spring. Inside, the room was warm enough to breathe without seeing it. Yet still, he shivered. He clicked publish. The screen dimmed for a moment. Not black, but that same dull sepia of old hymnal pages left in floodwater. The video went live. A viewer pinged in another. Then none. Then, all at once, comments bloomed like mold in a locked chapel. Lyrics, reversed prayers, Gregorian syllables, spelled phonetically, by trembling hands. One reads simply, 32.9982N, 96.7987W, bring the veil. Another, beneath it, ad sanctam matrim, orbis, to the Holy Mother of the world. She keeps chewing. The narrator's hands hovered over the keyboard. He didn't type. He scrolled. Some comments weren't words, just the outline of teeth, made in hyphen and slash. Some glitched, replicating endlessly. They didn't bury her name. They baptized it, again, and again, and again. He leaned forward. The audio playback suddenly stuttered. His voice, his own voice, warped mid-sentence. They don't want you to listen, because if you do, she won't need to whisper anymore. The screen froze. A white pop-up crawled upward. This content has been deemed emotionally hazardous. Commentary is closed by order. He stared at the phrase, by order, not by platform, not by policy, by order. He reached for the mouse, but the cursor moved without him, slid over archive settings, clicked. A second window opened. Password prompt. His childhood name was already typed in. He hadn't entered it. The cursor blinked once, then twice, accepted, and then the footage began to play on its own. Not the video he'd uploaded, but an older one, grainy, analog, static. Astor, before the fire. A view from the back of the nave, sunlight through stained glass like blood diluted in milk. A child's voice humming, low, off-key, pausing now and then to breathe, but never stopping. He had never seen this footage before, but he knew it. He could smell it. Soot, wax, a faint undertone of linen gone sour. The camera panned slowly toward the altar. There was a veil draped across it, pale gray, embroidered with black thread in symbols, not ecclesiastical, but maternal. Crib symbols, tooth sigils. A rattle lay beside it, cracked open, hollow dot in the center of the veil. Something moved, not a person, not quite, just the veil, folding, inhaling, as if covering a mouth not ready to be done. His voice crackled into the room, over the speakers. Not everything buried was meant to stay lost. The screen snapped black. He shut the laptop. The hum didn't stop. Somewhere beneath the floorboards, something was whispering again. No words, just friction and breath. And then just under the hum a scraping sound, like thread pulled through cloth or teeth across porcelain. He stood. The room was dim, but not dark. One of the bulbs above the mirror had gone out. He watched himself in the reflection, noting something behind him that wasn't moving, but wasn't quite still. A smear, a veil. He turned. Nothing. But on his desk where the rattle had once been, in the footage now sat, a small, ash cloth bundle. He didn't open it. Not then. He pressed record on his phone instead. His voice trembled. If you're watching this, they've already flagged me. The comments are closed. The archive was breached. I didn't post that footage. I didn't upload the veil. A breath, I think she did. He looked to the corner. The bundle hadn't moved, but the air near it shimmered faintly, like heat over a grave. They don't want you to listen, because if you do she won't need to whisper anymore. He stared at the lens a moment longer, then walked off screen. The video ended, and for 3 days, nothing happened. No new uploads, no live streams. His account remained open, but empty, until the final file appeared. No notification, no title, just a thumbnail, the cracked icon of a saint with no face. The footage played without prompting. It showed the desk. The bundle opened. Inside, a baptismal veil, burnt at the center, still damp. And over it, scrawled in soot, "She's not finished." Then, silence, and the faintest sound of chewing.